Welcome back to Switch to Linux. This is another outdoor philosophy. This is the closest I'm going to get to outside right now because it's actually very rainy out there. Very, very rainy. I did want to get a video out though. So I want to talk, I think one last video here on minimalism. And then what we're going to do is change gears a little bit. And I'm not completely sure what exactly I'm going to do next on the outdoor philosophy. Maybe I'll do a series down on business or something, but I did want to go ahead and get some final words on minimalism out of the way. Of course, we talked about digital minimalization. We've talked about each room in the house, going through and asking these questions about what do we have and why. And ultimately, when we get down to it, to what minimalism is, the fallacy that some people have is that minimalism is just to get rid of everything. And that's not what minimalism is. Minimalism is to ask the question of what do you have and why. And you keep the things that have good use and you don't keep the things that don't. And this will raise fun questions about, what are you relying on? And this is another aspect. When you're completely reliant on physical objects, that's more problematic. And so these are those questions that we raise in the terms of talking about minimalism. So you can actually kind of hear it's a little echoey, and that's because everywhere else in my house, it doesn't really look like anyone lives in. My office looks a little cluttered and things, but most other rooms, there's not much. And understand, I've had a time in my life that I had a house that was, very well furnished and lots of decorations and knickknacks and things hanging on the walls and stuff like that. Some of it is when you live in apartment complexes like I do now, you don't necessarily want the hassle of going through and fixing all the walls after you hanging things in. But part of it too is just, I look back at pictures now of how I used to have everything. I had, photos all over the place, and really it was nice and homey and cozy and lived in, but it was also a pain to clean and collected dust and really didn't contribute a whole lot, and in many ways becomes a distraction. And that's the part in minimalism that we start to do is we ask what are the things that we have and why. So like if I want to go and vacuum the whole house, I can vacuum my whole house now in less than 5 minutes because I don't have tons and tons and tons of things to move out of the way. I don't have to spend 3 hours dusting the living room because I have 15 shelves of stuff. They're just kind of compiling things all over the place. And then part of it is asking yourself which appliances do you need or not. And I'll kind of follow up. I did end up buying that small crock pot, which means now I have 2 crock pots. I have a big one, I have a small one, but actually that's not super bad because the small crock pot allows me to do things like baked beans or some other smaller type things. The large crock pot I actually used to do a lot of prep cooking type stuff, but that still doesn't bring the appliance count pretty high in this place. Still pretty easy to move. In fact, the small one I think will fit inside the big one, etc., etc. So the reality is it's not the absence of stuff. It is asking yourself why you have the stuff that you have. That is the ultimate heart behind minimalism. When we talked about the digital files, for example, the digital files in minimalism, what we were trying to do is saying, do I need 3 or 4 or 500 pounds of tax documents, or is that better to set in a digital file and have a couple redundant copies of that, which I have, and then have those redundant copies, copy in a safety deposit bank, so you're definitely not going to lose them. And then that actually opens up the ability to have things like, in reality, in your personal taxes, you don't have to have your personal taxes for more than 3 years. If you have a business like I have, you have to keep your business tax records for 5 years or 7 years, I think it is. And so it raises this question, do I throw out everything that's older than that? And I'm a person that oftentimes likes to go back through journals. I like to go back and evaluate where I've been. I like to see where I've been so I can understand where I'm going. And that's kind of one of those those things that we look at, we look toward, is if we learn from our past, we will not repeat the mistakes in our future. And so with that being said, I love keeping track of the old pay stubs that I used to have, to see how much did I really make 20 years ago when I was working in restaurants. And that is kind of some of those things that I look to, is what are those things that I need, and does it take room? Well, if you have a good digital plan, you don't need to save the actual physical papers. I mean, understand that. 1 year ago today, I had all of those physical pay stubs from working in the restaurants 20 years ago. In fact, I think it was over 20 years ago at this point. I can't remember. But I had all those. And as part of my digital minimalism, I scanned them all in. I took photographs of them, high-res photographs, and then I keep a copy of those. I'm able to shred all of the documents, which basically made my closet go from, I think I had 6 or 7 boxes of tax records. I'm down to Zipola, 0. The only tax records I have in paper are 2017's things. I haven't scanned them in yet. Now, I did decide what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep 1 year's worth of records around. Like, not all the records, but I'm going to keep the paper tax returns around if I actually have them in paper. The last couple years, I haven't even gotten those in paper. Just because it's kind of a pain in the butt to pull up the encrypted drives to look at things if I need to. And sometimes I need to do that for estimating tax purposes and things like that. And so in the scope of the digital minimalizing, what I ended up doing is taking all that stuff, putting it into a nice systematic way on my backup computers, and then getting rid of all of those things. As far as the DVDs, the CDs, all the music, we like our media and music collections. Well, I used to have 2 giant bins of those. I have everything now cut down to 1 small bin, because I threw away almost all of the cases for the CDs and the cases for the DVDs. I saved just the disc. In the case of the CDs, I saved the disc and the inserts in CD binders, which you can get for a few bucks. So I ended up getting 2 400 capacity CD binders. I think they're like 15 or 20 bucks a piece. Cut all that stuff in, and that actually allowed me to get rid of, I think I got rid of, let's see, 3 4 3 by 2 by 1.5 foot bin was what my DVDs were in, and another one was like a 2 by 1.5 by 2, or a 2.5 by 2 by 2.5. So that boils down to like at least 20 square foot just to get rid of those things. I have it all condensed down to 2 little carrying cases. That's where I'm down to. And I decided I had a whole rack of all of the sermons and things that I had, because I have 30 gigabytes of sermons. Now, with those, I've always done a really good job of keeping those digitally organized. So I already had those. So what I actually did with the sermons, I took the sermons and I spread them throughout the community libraries. And so hopefully those sermons are making their way into the hands of other people. I still have a legal copy of it, because I don't care if you copy and distribute the things, as long as you're not selling them. I still have copies of all of those sermons. I can listen to any of them at any time. And now I can bless someone else that you're walking through a community library. Is there anything cool in here? Like, whoa, wow, there's a sermon by this guy. This sermon sounds interesting. And so I did things like that, spreading the sermons out. Now, the one thing I'm still doing is I'm working on, just out of view here, I have a little bookshelf back here. This is actually my to-read book pile down here, which is... it's way bigger than it should be. I got to get to some reading. And then I have a book pile. For me, if you've been following my whole journey on this, you know that getting rid of books for me is the hard part. I love books. I've loved books ever since high school. And I started collecting some books around then. And I'm to the point right now to where I made some decisions and said, well, I'm going to get rid of 30 books. I ended up getting rid of about 100 or 200. So that's actually really good. And then getting rid of a couple hundred books, I've decided which books did I want to keep. So looking around here, I've kept some of my favorite Christian books that have had some of the best impacts for me, like Good to Great in God's Eyes by Chip Ingram is a fabulous book. I kept a copy of that one. Same author, Miracle of Life Change. I kept that one. There's a great one about the dangers of the humanist teachings in college called University of Destruction. I have a copy of a couple copies of that on the shelf. Complete works of C.S. Lewis. Now, some books, like Pilgrim's Progress, I don't have that anymore because those are free digital copies. Any book I could get a good free legal DRM free digital copy, that is actually in my book libraries. And so I keep all those in my book servers. And that is kind of where I'm looking at in that respect is just making those decisions. What can I keep around? Because while I love reading books on paper, once I've read it on paper once, I generally just keep it around to refer to it. And the digital copies are way better as reference. It's like, where is that part? I can do a keyword search. Reading the books, I like keeping the paper copies. And so I'm just evaluating which books. I'm still in the process. So over here, there's actually a few different Bible translations I want to get rid of after I make some more notes in them. And then I'm just gonna get rid of them. Just throw them in the community libraries. Fortunately, we have like 5 or 6 community libraries in our area. And so what I'm doing is just making all of those decisions in minimalism, asking why is it I have this? Is there a utilitarian purpose? Is it a purpose in, is it a sentimental reason? And then I ask this question about, if it's a sentimental reason, can I take a photo of it to remember the thing? And I mean, I've been carrying around things. I think I talked about this earlier too. I've carried around things from house to house to house to house. Like, I played a musical instrument in high school, and I kept that musical instrument. I moved it from where I lived in high school to grad school, where I went to grad school. 2 different apartments in grad school. The first apartment I had when I left grad school, all the way across country, all the way back, 2 or 3 different apartments there. And then finally I'm like, why do I keep carrying this stupid thing around? It's mostly damaged. It hasn't been played in 15 years. It's all, it's all hardened out. I was keeping it for sentimental reasons. I'm like, let me just take a bunch of photos of the thing and give it the old heave-ho. And using that methodology, I managed to get rid of about another 300 or 400 pounds. So it boils down to the next time I move, one small moving van can move everything I own. And when you get to that point in your life, everything comes off your shoulders. You're not burdened by all of this excess stuff. And one of the things that made me get into this is I was thinking back as to how was my life when I first moved out of my parents' house? How was it? Well, I managed to get an amazing deal. My cousin at the time worked at a bank over in Western PA, not too far from Pittsburgh. And this guy's like, yeah, I got all this stuff I want to get rid of. And my cousin really wanted a washer and dryer. And he's like, $150, man, you can have everything. Well, he knows I'm moving, into my own complete apartment. He's like, hey, this guy's got all this apartment full of furniture. He's letting go for like $100. I just want the washer and dryer. You want the rest? I'm like, sure. He says, tell you what, you buy the moving truck, I'll pay the money, you and I will go down there with a moving truck, and we'll take all this stuff. So I end up getting this apartment's full of furniture for the price of a moving truck, which is a good deal. And then, of course, my cousin got his washer and dryer out of the deal. And what did that come with? It had like a big wardrobe cabinet, I had a couch, a chair, I think there was a kitchen table in that. And I think there was maybe a bookshelf or an entertainment stand, something in there. So that's kind of what it was. So it wasn't a lot. And when I first moved out of my parents' house into my first apartment, which was a 500 square foot studio apartment, I didn't have a bed. And I really didn't have a bed most of my life, so I didn't really care. Is that true? No, I guess I didn't have a bed for a few years in high school. I slept on the floor, slept on a couch, whatever. I didn't care. And so I moved into this apartment, and I had a couch, which was just fine. I don't need a bed. I got a couch. So in fact, fun trivia, I still actually sleep on the couch. I have a queen-size bed. I rarely sleep in it. I usually sleep on the couch. But I had the couch, I had the chair, I had a kitchen table, I had a little media stand, I had a couple bookshelves. Let's see. I think I kept my favorite media stand. I think I kept it at my parents' house. It was just, we built it in the room. Getting it out of that room, I think it's still in the room. If it's honestly, I'm not moving it. It's not moving. But I had that kind of stuff in a 500 square foot apartment, and it wasn't overly cramped. Now I ended up acquiring a queen size bed because I had a neighbor that I used to help out a lot. She was a visiting professor at the university. Helped her out a lot, and when she moved back to Michigan, she just had this new queen-size mattress. She's like, yeah, you can have it if you want. I'm like, sure. So I go over there and take the mattress. So I have this 500-square-foot apartment with basically has this giant bed in it. But I remember getting that bed. It was like a significant thing to actually get this bed. So I had this bed and, the bed, the couch, a chair, and really no other room in a little studio apartment with a queen-size bed and a couch and a chair and all this other stuff. But I looked around, and I still, at that point in time, I was still sentimentally holding on to a lot of things, and then I decided I was going to get rid of some of those things. I went through this mad dash cleaning out, and at that point in time, I also cleaned out, a couple 100 pounds worth of excess crap. Just got rid of things. And then you realize how light it was, but every possession that I had, this is a funny thing about moving in college towns where they don't like to negotiate many times. I had this apartment that the lease was up on the 31st. The next apartment I was taking, the lease started on the 4th. I'm trying to can I get into, can I stay in this apartment an extra 4 days? Nope. So I had to move all of my possessions out of there into storage for 4 days while this other apartment was opening up. Every possession that I had fit in a 5x10 storage locker. That's pretty impressive. Even today, I don't have a lot, but I couldn't fit everything in a 5x10. Now, when I moved back out east from when I lived in the West, let's see. I think that was that a 5x10? That was a 5x10 that I had, I think. I had a 5x10, but I had gotten rid of a lot of things. When I had moved, I was mentoring teenagers, and they were just coming of age. So I'm like, dude, here's a chair, here's a kitchen table, here's some couches, here's all this kind of stuff. And it was funny. I go back to visit my friend, and he was doing the same thing I was doing. He was sleeping on the couch. In fact, it was the same couch that I had bought when I moved out of my parents' house from my friend. He's like, I'm 18, I'm still sleeping on your couch. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So, I got rid of the couch, I got rid of the chair, pretty much the entire round of furniture that I had at that point in time. I unloaded it out west and fit everything else I had into a 5x10. Of course, having taken a few trips, I had already taken about 3 or 4 carloads east. I still had the house for about a 4 or 5 month overlap. So I had things in the house, and then I'm bringing carloads of stuff over. Now, if you haven't ever seen the types of things I can fit in a single carload, and I'll throw a photo here if I can find it. That photo is what I fit into a little Mazda Protege. I did that 5 times. And so, with that little Mazda Protege, I managed to fit that much stuff 5 times, which is, your average person fits about that in a 5x10. So, I had a lot of things. And as I started evaluating minimalism, right now where I'm at, I have a 3-bedroom apartment, and I had the bedroom closet just had clothes in it. The spare room closet, my weight room closet, that was just completely full up to the ceiling with a bunch of stuff. And I had a whole lot of other stuff in the office closet. I had taxes, things like that. I have it condensed down now to, I actually have more empty bins than full bins at this point. And I'm keeping them because when I go to move again, it's a lot better to move all your stuff in bins than it is to move your stuff in other things. Now, of course, there's bookshelves right next to me. Next time I move, at least one of these bookshelves is getting thrown completely away. I have a very nice foldable bookshelf that's actually in the closet right now. It's not getting used. And the reason is, I'll just go ahead and show you here. If I can. So you can kind of see how these are organized there. They just kind of fit see if I can get this back there. There you go. That's good enough. They fit nicely. They fit very nicely where and how they are. And I like the setup of having this is my study, really. I have this nice glass table here, and then that actually provides kind of a shelf space to store the extra books when I'm doing my research. But the one bookshelf that's closest to the walkway, it is actually completely going to fall apart next time it's moved. It's the gravity of the heavy books is what's keeping it together right now. So I'm going to throw that away, and then whenever I move again, I'm going to take the folding collapsible bookshelf that is in the closet, and that's going to replace this one. I'm just not going to do it yet because it doesn't have the shelf space that this does. So I'm just kind of evaluating the things as I looked at what I had. There was so much stuff, and I just needed to get rid of some of that stuff. And that's what my journey of minimalism has been, is just getting rid of all the extra stuff. So the one place I have not fully reduced yet is actually the kitchen. I was going to do it on video, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I have a coffee pot that hasn't been used for almost a year. In fact, it's, I want to say it was May. I want to say it was May of last year is when I finally decided to go with the French press. And so now I have the French press. I kept the coffee pot in case the French press didn't work, but since I've been using the French press, I have no desire to go back to using a regular coffee pot again. So I'm getting rid of that. Of course, I bought the French press and a kettle because I asked this question, did some research, what is the best way to boil water? Is it better to boil water in the microwave, or is it better to boil water on the stovetop? Well, neither. It's actually best, if that's the case you're in, it's best to get an electric kettle because they are optimized for the efficiency. So I end up getting a Hamilton Beach 1 liter kettle, a smaller kettle, and it boils about a full, I think it will boil like is it up to a liter or up to a liter and a half? I think it's up to a liter and a half or 2 liter capacity in 5 minutes. Boiling water, and I usually just boil half the water because I have a 1 liter French press. So I have that. I still have a bread machine. I still have a popcorn machine, neither of which I've used for a while because I've been learning how to do things without those types of excess things. And there's a bunch more things I have that I need to put on Craigslist, and if it doesn't sell on Craigslist, I think I'm going to give myself a deadline of maybe like early June. If the early stuff on Craigslist doesn't sell by early June, it's just all going to go to Goodwill because I don't really need extra things. Like I have an extra bin completely full of things that's just Craigslist sale stuff that I just want to get rid of, and couple tables here as well, things like that. And so I'm still cutting things back. I'm not cutting things back as fast as I was, but I'm about to actually jump right back into it again. Just getting more things out. That's the thing, is think about what your life was like when you first moved out of your parents' house the first time and ask yourself, do I really need all this stuff? Or was life a fun adventure back then when you didn't have a whole lot and you were probably a little happier than you are now? That's what this whole concept of minimalism is. Asking yourself, why do you have this? Why do you have 15 boxes of magazines stuffed in the corner? Why do I have 150 books, many of which I will probably never read again in my lifetime? Do I really need to keep all these laying around? And that's the question I've been wrestling with. And I got to tell you that some of these answers, yes, I am going to read them. Some of them, no. The ones I know I'm not going to read again, I already got rid of. Some of them, I don't know. The to-read books, a lot of these, I'll tell you, are going to be gone as soon as I read them. That's why I gotta find a good business or life philosophy type book from the shelf. Read that as my next outdoor philosophy series. In fact, why don't I just go ahead and go down there and see if I can find something. We're going to cut a little bit out of this as I look for some things. So it turns out the majority of the books down there are Christian books. I want to save the Christian books for the Christian channel. So here are the secular books. Leave me feedback in the comments below. What should we talk about next on outdoor philosophy? Or if none of these books seem appealing, give me another topic. We'll cover for outdoor philosophy. So of the books that I have, Losing Generations talks about adolescence in high-risk settings. This is by the National Research Council. A very in-depth book which looks at the trends of why are we losing our young people, whether societally or things like this. Now, of course, this book, I believe, was written kind of before the cell phone revolution, so there may be some outdated things in it, but I think that the philosophies would much be the same. I also have the book Deadly Lessons, same group, National Research Council, Deadly Lessons, which is Understanding Lethal School Violence. Once again, just predating the cell phone revolution, but a lot of, basically what this is a lot of case studies and summaries as to what causes all this school violence that we're seeing, particularly focusing. A follow-up to one of my favorite secular books, which is called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Here I have Working with Emotional Intelligence, which I believe is more like a guide for how you work. This one might be the closest to what I've done with the other books in the series. Reading these, basically it's the concept of emotional intelligence is kind of like an IQ. This is an EQ. How emotionally stable are you as a person, and how do you put that into focus? That's this one. I also have The Lucifer Principle. I've read this one once before, and I actually would love to read it again. Basically, it looks at it's a concept of like humanism and how our intellect will not solve our problems. It's called The Lucifer Principle, a scientific expedition into the forces of history. Very fascinating. I'm not sure it's a good outdoor philosophy book, but like I said, I have read it in the past, and it is quite intriguing as a book. And then the last one I have is from Neil Postman, who is a absolutely amazing thinker. Neil Postman also brings us the book Amusing Ourselves to Death, which is a hybridization of 1984 and Brave New World. Of course, 1984 was how the external government is going to seek to oppress us, versus Brave New World is how we are going to oppress ourselves. And what he did in Amusing Ourselves to Death is a hybridization of that world, looking at both forces, which is probably the closest to where we are. This guy's a social commentary who nails it every time. I have no idea what this particular book is about. It's called Building a Bridge to the 18th Century, and it talks about how our past can improve our future. So those are the book options we have. Let me know in the comments down below the next book we should tackle. I think the closest to what we've done on this video series in the past is Working with Emotional Intelligence, but you guys let me know, and that'll help me get some of these books off my to-read pile in a sooner manner, so I can read them and decide, am I going to keep these or get rid of these? But that's what I wanted to say. This is kind of my wrap-up to minimalism. Of course, if you want to help support the channel, you can check out switchlinks.com/support. And I have the ways you can help support the channel there. I do have some merchandise if you happen to like coffee cups or shirts or things. Those are at shop.switchtolinux.com. Those come from Spreadshirt. Well, thanks for watching, folks. I hope that you enjoy minimalizing your life and switching to Linux.